got a paternity test on our son behind my back, then got his revenge days later. Hello, Reddit. My name is Glory, and I'm 35 years old. I've been married for about 10 years now to my husband, Nick, and we have a son, Matt. I'm here because I need some help. What would you do if you were in my situation if you found out that your husband did a paternity test on your son behind your back and then decided to do the most awful thing afterward? Well, that's my situation right now. The problem isn't the fact that he went behind my back to do it. The problem is the fact that the DNA test result came out, and it showed that there was 0.0% chance of Matt being Nick's son. And my husband had been furious when he found out. He had been so angry and had decided to take his revenge on me, and he had done it in the worst way possible. On our 10th year anniversary, he decided to celebrate it in grand style. He asked me to invite lots of people, particularly friends and family, to celebrate with us. He even gave me loads of money to get everything I wanted to make the party a huge success, and I was happy. I thought he was just so in love with me and wanted to show the world just how much he loved me. I didn't suspect a thing. I was just feeling happy that I got to finally do something big for myself and show everyone that I am not that loser anymore. I did everything. I mean, from the dresses to the matching bag and shoes and my jewelry and to the party itself. I employed the best people to do everything, and I made sure everything was great. The day of the party came, and everything started out so well. My friends were gushing over my dress, and everyone was wanting to speak to me. I felt like a very important person, all smiles, welcoming people to my party and feeling extra important. And everything was going so well, just the way I wanted it to go. But then came the bad part. Nick had decided he had a speech he wanted to give, and it was for me. He started out well, talking about the beautiful years we've spent together and how much he loved me. When he used loved instead of love, I dismissed it because I thought it was just an English word. It didn't mean anything. But then Nick had decided that his present for me was inside a file. He gave it to me, and I was surprised. So I opened it quickly, thinking it contained some tickets to perhaps Paris, or somewhere I've always talked about visiting. But when I opened the file and saw what was in it, I was so shocked the paper slipped out of my hand to the ground. Nick had smirked then and whispered into my ear, "Happy anniversary to you, my cheating wife." I didn't know what to say or do at that moment. There was nothing I could say to defend myself. So I just stared at Nick while he announced to everyone what he had given me. He said his gift had been a paternity test he had carried out on our son, whom he raised lovingly as his own, but apparently isn't his. Everyone was shocked and started murmuring and looking at me. I just stood there staring at Nick, and I didn't even know I was crying until Nick smiled. He told me that I should save my tears, as he still had another surprise for me. At this point, you'd know that I was already dreading the next gift, but Nick didn't mind. He wanted his revenge, and he was going all in for it. He called out for someone, and when that someone came, I was beyond shocked and tried to turn away and maybe run or beg the ground to swallow me up. I just wanted to leave that place somehow, but Nick had held my hand and told me to stay put for my next gift. When the person eventually showed up, it was Sam. Sam was the guy I cheated with during the early years of our marriage. He was our gardener, and it had just been a mistake. It only happened once. And after that, I got pregnant, but I was sleeping with Nick too, so I thought it would probably be for Nick. It was after I found out I was pregnant that I convinced Nick to send away Sam by lying about some things he didn't do so that Sam would not think to lay a claim on my baby. He looked as tattered as he had always looked. He wore a suit, probably the one Nick got him, but he still didn't look good in it. And staring at him at that moment, I instantly regretted sleeping with him. He looked so annoying with his bulging eyes, which I realize now looks a lot like my son's eyes. Nick told everyone that Sam is the father of my child. Even Sam was so surprised. Apparently Nick didn't tell him what he was going to do at my party. I couldn't come to terms with the fact that Sam will be regarded as my son's father. My son would have no hope for the future. All the dreams of studying in another country when he was old enough for university, and then the promises of a house and a brand new car when he got admission would all be gone. My son will have to struggle to go to some college that is not up to standard, and he will hate me. Everything was just swirling through my mind, and before I could process what I was doing, I was on my knees, crying and begging Nick to stop and listen to me. I didn't mind that people were there. I didn't mind how they saw me. All I minded was Nick and my son. But Nick had already made up his mind. His last gift that he gave me were divorce papers. It's been days now. Days since I've been calling and texting Nick nonstop, but he wouldn't even respond to either of them. I've gone to his office. I've gone to what used to be our home before Nick kicked my son and me out, but the securities that had at one time respected me now looked at me harshly and told me to leave without giving me access. I'm so tired and desperate, I wouldn't even talk about my family and friends. Everyone has been avoiding me, including my mom, who benefited the most when I married Nick. Don't judge me just yet. It wasn't my fault from the beginning. Or maybe it is. I don't know anything anymore. You see, before I met Nick, I was a poor girl living with her mother inside a house that could barely house an ant. We were every definition of poor. My mother had to do a lot of begging for us to feed at least once a day. But all of a sudden, things got better for us. And that was because my mother started dating a rich man. She was his mistress. He was married with 5 kids, all much older than I am. But he was interested in my mother. And because of the money he gave her, my mother didn't mind the fact that he had a family. I didn't mind it either. It was better than sleeping on the streets. At least he got us a nice apartment and we started to live comfortably. But I didn't like the man very much. Because as I grew, he started to show some level of interest in me that was beyond his mistress's daughter. My mother didn't know because she was too blinded by money to see what was right in front of her. I didn't bother telling her either. I left home when I was 20 and moved to another town entirely. I started working there as a waitress, and it was there I first met Nick. He had come to buy some drinks with his friends, and he had seen me and taken an interest in me. He started coming more often, and I couldn't deny that I was attracted to him too. Nick gave me everything. He gave me my life. He helped me set up a mini restaurant when I told him I loved cooking. He bought me an apartment, and he literally made me who I am today. I didn't hesitate when he asked me to marry him. But then came my first disappointment. I had always dreamt of a big fairy tale wedding, perhaps because of how poor I was growing up. I've always dreamt of that charming prince that would sweep me off my feet and give me a big wedding. But Nick refused anything big. He wanted something really small with only our families present. I was disappointed and unhappy about it, but I eventually agreed to it. The second disappointment came when I first slept with Nick. Nick, throughout our courtship, had insisted we wait until marriage. Not because he was a virgin, but according to him, I was special, and he wanted to keep things between us special. It didn't sit well with me, but I had agreed just to make him happy. I might not have mentioned it before, but before I met Nick, during my waitress job, I met a few guys and slept with them. It wasn't like I dated those guys. It was just casual sex, just 2 people having fun. So Nick was my first real boyfriend, as I like to think. Anyways, the sex. It wasn't what I expected. Nick wasn't the dirty type when having sex. He just wanted to do the usual and be done with it. He didn't believe in going down on me or me going down on him. He didn't do the extras, just the normal usual sex. It was boring in bed. But I endured the first year because I loved him, and I didn't want to lose him or the financial gains that came with him. I expected that I would get pregnant soon after marriage, but the first year passed, and yet nothing. So did the second, and the third year was already halfway. I began to panic because, according to my mother, I had to have a child if I wanted to be a secure part of Nick's life. Although Nick never complained, he was always telling me there was still time and that we could wait. There was no need to rush. In fact, he was always trying to spoil me silly. Buying me expensive things that usually lifted my mood, he would take me out to dinner, or sometimes it was a surprise trip. There was always some surprise or the other waiting for me almost all the time, and I liked it and didn't want it to end just because I didn't have a child for him yet. But the fact that he gave me everything still didn't make up for the sexual frustrations. So I decided that I needed to do something about my insatiable sex appetite, so I went to a club on a Friday night when Nick had gone out of town for business. I met a stranger. I cannot remember his name because I was too tipsy to comprehend anything. I just remember him taking me into one of the toilet stalls and ramming into me fast and hard. The sex was thrilling, perhaps because it was something I shouldn't even be doing. and I did it every other night until Nick came home. I do not know which of the strangers it may be that might be Matt's father. Maybe it was that last stranger I slept with, the one who had been into kinky stuff, tying me up and covering up my eyes so I couldn't see, spanking me until I was screaming in pain and crying, then inserting something that was hard, very huge and very painful inside my vulva. I know it wasn't his dick, because he finally, after all the torture, untied me and allowed me to touch him, and it was then he slept with me. Till now, I cannot even make out what his face was. I eventually stopped going to those clubs for fear of someone recognizing and telling Nick all about it, so I thought to just stick to the house for a while. But that didn't last too. Nick's gardener back then, Sam, had been employed a few weeks before Nick traveled, and he stayed in the house with us. Nick had always loved his garden and always liked to tend to them, but because he was always busy traveling and with work too, he had to employ someone to tend the garden for him. Sam wasn't fine or anything like that, and I wasn't even attracted to him in the first place. But Nick wasn't doing enough sexually, and I couldn't go out to those clubs again, so I had to settle for what I had. I didn't need much to even seduce him. He apparently wanted me, because that particular day, I had just asked him to come in when he was tending to the garden for a quick snack, and when he came in, I was already naked. Sam apparently didn't need any other convincing as he removed his dirty gloves and clothes and laid with me. I was very disappointed after having sex with Sam. I couldn't even let him go down on me because of how dirty he was. It disgusted me, but I didn't let it show to him. When it was all over, I just dismissed him. A week after Nick came back home, I discovered I was pregnant, and when I told Nick, he was so happy. I knew that Sam could pose a problem because when I saw and heard Nick telling him excitedly that I was pregnant, he had this strange look on his face, perhaps wondering if the child could be his. I had to do something. So I lied. I lied to Nick that Sam had been trying to sleep with me and that I didn't trust him when he and I were alone around the house. Nick had to let Sam go. I was so happy when he did so. My pregnancy journey was quite easy. Nick made it so because he spoiled me silly, buying me loads of stuff, including the ones I needed and the ones I didn't need. I was happy and glad I married him. He made me really happy. After I gave birth, another disappointment came again. Nick didn't want a loud celebration. He wasn't a fan of exposing his affairs. He hated it when people even knew what was going on with him. And according to him, it had been what had made him as successful as he is. We were two different people in that area. I wanted people to know that I was a comfortable wife of a wealthy man. All the new friends I made, who were always celebrating the tiniest things with a big party, I wanted to be able to do the same, but I couldn't because Nick didn't want that. It frustrated me, and to be honest, it led to a few of our arguments. But Nick is a very stubborn man. If he wants something, he is never convinced otherwise, and that makes me angry most times. While baby Matt was growing, I started to doubt his paternity myself because he looked nothing like Nick. But Nick was so in love with Matt that I noticed anything odd, so I dismissed it as nothing. So far, Nick accepted the baby and didn't doubt it. That was all that mattered to me. For the next few years, I didn't cheat on Nick again. I didn't want to risk the chances of getting pregnant again with another man's baby. But after Matt, I couldn't get pregnant again. Nick wasn't bothered by it, so I just focused on raising my baby boy. Matt loves Nick so much, and if he didn't see him for a day or two, he got sick. He was always crying and whining for his dad. Sometimes I get frustrated and beg Nick to take the boy along with him on his business trips. It was after Matt started kindergarten that I was able to rest from him. I hardly go out. My restaurant was in good shape, and instead of overseeing everything like I did before, I left it in the hands of a professional chef. I did so when I was pregnant with Matt, and because the chef's really good at his job, I just let him continue handling things while I sit at home and just relax before Matt comes back home. But then I got bored, always being in the house and not having many places to go. At first I shopped a lot, thinking it could fill the void. I bought several things each day that I didn't even need. Nick never complained because it didn't even make a dent in his wealth. But then shopping was not enough. I decided to pick up a hobby, but I wasn't even interested in most things, and I got tired easily. I realized that staying at home for a long period without doing anything was making me gain weight. So instead of going to the gym, I decided to hire a personal trainer. That was how I met Jim. I do not need to describe a personal trainer's body because I'm guessing you guys already know how ripped he'd be. Jim had been introduced to me by one of my friends, and he was mouth-watering. He had this body that begged to be worshipped with tongue, and whenever he pulled off his shirt, you wonder where all that hair is disappearing to in his trousers. Don't curse at me, I know. I was married, and it was wrong to desire another man, but I felt like an animal in heat ever since I saw Jim, and I couldn't help myself. The sexual urges that died after giving birth to Matt suddenly came to life, and I couldn't help myself. I became desperate to have a taste of Jim. I wanted to sleep with him, and I resorted to every means possible in the books to do so. I started wearing tight clothes to show my curves. My leggings became lighter, and if I bent too much, you could see the shape of my panties if I had one on, which I never did. I would make excuses of not knowing how to stretch properly so he could help me with a pose, and in the process, I would lean my body, particularly my bottom, into his erection. It wasn't harmless flirting this time. I wanted Jim to sleep with me, and he knew that but was hesitant. Probably because I was married, and he was just employed to help me train. But at that point, I didn't care what his hesitation was about. I just wanted to sleep with him, and I did everything I could to make it possible. One time I knew he was going to be around soon, and when I was sure he was around, I stepped into the shower and pretended like I had just had my bath, then walked by the living room naked. When Jim saw me, I saw his eyes darken in pleasure, and I pretended like I didn't know he was around and hurried into my room. One time, I was sucking a banana when he came around, and he definitely knew I was giving him the signs. But Jim still wouldn't do anything about it, and it frustrated me so much. I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. So that day, Nick had decided to take Matt with him on a quick business trip, and they were gone for most of the day. It gave me the opportunity to do what I intended to do. So when Jim arrived to train me, I called him and told him to come inside the room because I was feeling a bit feverish. He had come in, worried I was sick, but was met with the sight of me naked on the bed. I pretended I was too sick to grab anything to cover up, and Jim just stayed at a distance, staring at me. I turned slowly and in the process deliberately opened my legs for him to see in between. Jim's erection was instant and was obvious through his clothes. I invited him to bed to come help me relieve myself, and this time he hadn't needed further convincing. Sex with Jim was just great. He took his time with me, and I remember having orgasms numerous times, more than I could count that day. We had sex for close to 4 hours, and I was still wound up after. Jim was insatiable, and I liked that. I just knew I couldn't stop there. Jim and I started having a full-blown affair. Every time we met was for a marathon exercise. Sex. We even started meeting outside the house to avoid suspicion. We met at some cheap motel that had no cameras because I was paranoid about getting caught. Jim was just the perfect lover. Sex with him was quite addicting, and although I knew that he wasn't just sleeping with me alone, I still couldn't stop wanting more. I knew he was sleeping with the other married women he was training. He told me so himself just to brag about his sexual prowess. I wasn't in love with Jim or anything. I loved Nick very much, in fact. But Jim just knew how to really have sex, and it was a skill that Nick lacked much in. I didn't stop sleeping with my husband, though. Sleeping with Nick was lovemaking. We were two people in love, cementing our love with our bodies. While with Jim, it was just purely physical, nothing else. The worst thing happened when I got pregnant. I just knew that it wasn't Nick's baby, and I panicked. I didn't want Nick to suspect me. So I told Jim about it, and he flipped, demanding that I get rid of the baby, or he would beat it out of me. I had been so shocked because Jim had never been that violent or threatened violence with me before. Yes, he had been violent, but that was during sex, and I usually was being pleasured by it, so I didn't think that was a big deal until he found out about the pregnancy. I couldn't go to our normal hospital because Nick would definitely find out. I had to lie to Nick that I wanted to visit a friend he didn't know about, and I had gone out of town to get rid of the baby. I had some complications, though, but I couldn't even tell anyone, especially Nick. I bled for a week after the abortion, and I kept lying to Nick that it was my period and then some hormonal imbalances. Nick kept insisting we went to the hospital, but I would get angry and refuse to go. I wasn't truly angry. I was just afraid to go to the hospital with Nick to get a checkup. I knew they would immediately know that I had an abortion done, and that would have ended my marriage. After the whole abortion thing had passed, Jim started to avoid me. He hardly came to train me, and when he did come, it was brief, and he avoided all sorts of physical touches between us. I knew something was wrong, and when I asked him about it, he told me he wasn't interested in me anymore. I knew it had more to do with the baby than with me, so I told him that I had gotten rid of the baby. Jim was so happy, and then he confessed that he had 3 kids and a wife at home. He didn't want the responsibility of another baby on his neck. I was shocked when he confessed to me that he had kids and a wife. I never thought that Jim would ever be married. He was like an all-women-can-have toy, and I didn't expect him to actually be married and committed. Well, not exactly committed, given he was cheating with various women. My relationship with Jim ended abruptly when I heard that Jim had been caught sleeping with the wife of a business tycoon. The man had insisted that his wife was raped, and that he walked in on him raping her. To cut the long story short, Jim is serving a jail term as I write this. The man ensured through his connections that he would be there for a very long time. He then divorced his wife and didn't leave her a penny after he had successfully put Jim in jail. I know Nick's suspicion must have started from there. Because if Jim was apparently sleeping with a married woman, what was stopping him from trying with me? Problem is, he hadn't even needed to try. I was the one who seduced him. Nick asked me if anything happened between Jim and me, and I was quick to dismiss it and lie. I told him Jim tried to sleep with me once, but I told him off, and he didn't try again after that time. Nick just watched me and didn't say much. The next week in the house was quite tense for some reason. Nick refused to talk to me longer than was necessary, and he even refused to play with Matt. I didn't know what was going on, and when I asked him, he told me it was stress from work. After that 1 week of hostile treatment, Nick's behavior suddenly improved. He started smiling again, and he was showering me with gifts as he usually did. But one thing I should have noticed was that he barely spent time with Matt again. He usually was home if he didn't travel to read Matt bedtime stories, but he stopped. But I dismissed it as nothing, stupidly. Nick didn't spend much time with me either. He just bought me gifts whenever he came home. He barely touched me too, but I didn't mind. He was buying me gifts again. That was all that mattered to me. I should have seen it. I should have understood what was happening. I should have been able to tell that there was a shift in our marriage. But I was too blinded and only saw the things I wanted to see, and that has now ruined my life. Nick, for the first time since we've been together, had asked me to prepare for our 10th year anniversary in grand style. I should have known that something wasn't right, but I was too excited to finally be able to do the one thing I've always dreamed of since becoming Nick's wife. I planned meticulously. I did everything I was supposed to do to make sure everything went according to plan, but then, with the turnout of the event, the party went according to Nick's plan, not mine. His plan was to ruin my life. And it worked. Before Nick threw me out of the house, he told me that he had always known. I was so shocked. Nick had always known that there was a possibility that Matt wasn't his child because he had gotten involved in an accident before he met me, which affected his genital organs, and he had a 50% chance of fathering a child. He didn't tell me about the accident because his doctor had told him it was maybe treatable, and when he tried for years to treat himself and was about to give up and tell me about it, I had brought the news that I was pregnant. He said he was stupidly happy and didn't go back for a checkup to know whether or not he already had the chance of fathering a child because he loved me and wanted to trust me. But his suspicion had been aroused again by what happened with Jim. He said he noticed how fast I responded and how quickly I wanted to change the topic. He started suspecting me about everything, especially the paternity of Matt, and he had done his investigations by secretly carrying out a DNA test, which had turned out negative. The only person he could think of that was around me at that point was Sam, and he had decided to invite him to the party so he could further ruin my life. He left me with a sentence that has stayed with me for days now and refuses to leave my head. You disgust me, and I hope you spend the rest of your life living in darkness, just as you have done to me for the whole 10 years of our marriage. Guys, you cannot imagine how horrible I feel. I feel really bad and terrible for everything I did to Nick, and I just want to somehow make up for it. Because without Nick, I'm absolutely nothing, and everything in my life is returning to the way it once was in the past. It doesn't help matters that Sam has been calling repeatedly, asking if he truly is the father of my child. It doesn't help matters that my son keeps asking about his father, Nick. Please help me. What do I do? How do I get Nick to forgive me and accept Matt and me back into his life? Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been too long, but I'm sure for you guys it's too soon. I see how much you detest me and hate me through your harsh and very unfiltered words. How you think I got what I deserve and that Nick was right with the way he humiliated me in front of everyone and also threw me out of his house and life without anything. I know. I know what you guys think of me. And you know what? I don't mind. Because I think the worst of myself too. Because I think all of these are my fault. And that I deserve far much worse than I got. I behaved thoroughly like a sex worker, a greedy human, and I'm the worst wife and mother anyone would never wish for. My life right now is horrid. It's like a horror movie on display. I'm back. I'm back to the dump I used to be before Nick saw me and married me. I'm back to being that girl who did everything and anything for money. Only this time, I have extra responsibility, my son, who still cannot understand why we moved out of our big mansion to live in an apartment barely big enough for one person, or why his daddy is nowhere to be found. I regret so many things, and the one thing I regret the most is hurting Nick as much as I did. I feel horrible for everything I've done, and I cannot even begin to explain just how terrible I feel. It's like a veil covered my eyes while I was doing everything. No, scratch that. I was well aware of what I was doing. It's only that I wasn't aware that the consequences would be this dire and painful. Seducing all those men because I was a sex addict was a stupid thing to do, really. I thought I could get away with cheating on Nick for the rest of my life, but Karma isn't a very kind bitch now, is she? Nick was the most patient and the most loving man I could ever have had the privilege of meeting, and yet I managed to screw up. Really badly, in fact. It's just so sad how I've allowed my own greed and selfishness to ruin my life, and not just mine alone, but that of my sons, too. I feel so ashamed of myself. Matt will grow up and knowing what I did to him would hate me as much as Nick hates me now. And dealing with Nick's hatred is already draining enough. Having to deal with Matt's own would be killing. I'm so afraid of the future. Because I cannot see what it holds for me. Perhaps more pain or torture. Sam, who keeps insisting on finding out whether or not he's the father of Matt, had no money to pay for a DNA test. I had to scrape out all the money I ever had, and even borrow it to get the DNA test done. And now, we've found out that he really is the father of my child. But since he found out, he has not even shown up once. He has not asked to visit Matt or see him and get acquainted with him. He has just been giving excuses, and when I asked for some child support so I could take care of Matt, he was always coming up with excuses of not having enough to give. It's really frustrating to know that the man who is truly the biological father of Matt was just a coward. Nick, who had not even been his biological father, had done more despite being very busy with work. I cannot even blame him now, can I? I was the one who felt the need and urge to go to him for sex. He had only provided a service I needed at that point, and I'm now paying for that decision severely. I wish I could turn back the hands of time and retrace my steps. Then I wouldn't have been promiscuous and slept with everything that had erecting sticks in between their legs. I wish I had better control of myself, and had not been so stupid as to do what I did. Now I have no one, and I cannot even feed properly. I thought my mother was the worst, sleeping around with a married man back then. But now I realize that I'm much worse than she ever could be. Sleeping around with both married men and unmarried ones while being married myself. My life is just awful. So awful. Update. Hello, Reddit. This is actually my last post here. And I just wanted to say this. If you ever find yourself in my situation and you think the best thing to do is to sleep around with other men other than your partner, then you must be the biggest fool. It'd be better to learn from my mistakes and not make them. Look at me. It's barely been months now, and I'm already at the lowest pit bottom. I cannot even sleep properly because it's not my usual bed anymore. I have to pet my son to sleep every day because he cries every night, asking for his daddy, whom he still believes to be Nick. Sam has not made an appearance once since finding out about the paternity of Matt. He keeps giving excuses. After petting my son to sleep, then I do my own crying. I regret everything. Everything. I should never have taken Nick for granted. I should never have joked with his love. and I should have been grateful for the gift of him. Now I'm stuck with the nemesis I generated for myself through my carelessness and greed and so-called sexual urges. Now they don't even come again. It is probably someone who is well-fed that would think about sex. I'm out on the street every day trying to look for what to feed my kid and me. And Matt isn't even going to school anymore. He just stays at home while I go to work and brings something home for us to eat. My mother barely acknowledges me. She told me she was disappointed in me because she had been really happy when I found Nick, and that she thought I would never end up like her because I was with someone like Nick. But I had ended up proving her wrong. Well, I've disappointed everybody, including myself, and that I know I will forever pay for the rest of my life. Thanks and goodbye.